Pragmatism versus Posturing, Why Penelope Beckles Got Venezuela Spectacularly Wrong, an editorial by Professor Wall Street. In moments of geopolitical crisis, small nations face a fundamental choice: strategic pragmatism grounded in national interest, or performative rhetoric designed for domestic political consumption. The contrast in statements by Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar and opposition leader Penelope Beckles regarding U.S. military operations in Venezuela represent precisely this divergence and demonstrate why the PNM remains fundamentally unserious about governance. Prime Minister Persad-Bissessar's statement was brief, clear, and strategically sound. Trinidad and Tobago is not a participant in military operations, and we maintain peaceful relations with Venezuela. This is diplomacy, concise, factual, and calibrated to protect nation interests. Opposition leader Beckles, by contrast, delivered a verbose exercise in moral posturing that ignores economic reality, misunderstands diplomatic strategy, and demonstrates precisely why the PNM lost power. Her statement reads like it was crafted for international progressive audiences rather than the people of Trinidad and Tobago, whose livelihoods depend on practical governance, not ideological theater. Here are 10 reasons why Beckles' statement is dangerously misguided. 1. Economic suicide masquerading as principle. The United States is Trinidad and Tobago's largest trading partner, accounting for approximately 40% of our exports and a substantial portion of our imports. Our liquefied natural gas, LNG, petrochemicals, and manufactured goods flow primarily to American markets. Beckles' statement, implicitly critical of U.S. actions, risked antagonizing the economic lifeline that sustains thousands of Trinbagonian families. The UNC government understands what the PNM apparently does not. You can have principles or you can have poverty, but reckless diplomacy delivers both. 2. The fantasy of equidistance. Beckles' call for respect for sovereignty and non-interference sound noble in theory, but ignores geopolitical reality. Trinidad and Tobago is not a neutral superpower like Switzerland. We are a small Caribbean nation whose prosperity depends on access to American markets, investment, and security cooperation. Pretending we can lecture our primary economic partner about international law while depending on their economic goodwill is strategic illiteracy of the highest order. 3. Misunderstanding neutrality versus non-participation. The Prime Minister's statement achieves what Beckles' does not. It clarifies TNT's position without unnecessarily antagonizing either party. Stating we are not a participant is diplomatic precision. It confirms our non-involvement without condemning American actions or endorsing Venezuelan positions. Beckles' moralizing, by contrast, implicitly criticizes U.S. actions while offering nothing substantive. This is amateur hour diplomacy. 4. The embassy concern is legitimate but weaponized. Beckles correctly notes that TNT has an embassy with staff in Caracas and their safety matters. But using this genuine concern as a cudgel against the Prime Minister's statement is transparent political opportunism. The safety of diplomatic personnel is addressed through secure channels, not performative Facebook posts. Does Beckles genuinely believe the Prime Minister is unaware of or unconcerned about our embassy staff? This is manufactured outrage for political points. 5. Ignoring regional economic integration. Trinidad and Tobago's economy is deeply integrated with U.S. economic systems, banking relationships, energy sector partnerships, remittance flows, trade financing, and investment capital. CARICOM itself depends heavily on economic relationships with North America. Beckles' statement jeopardizes this integration for the sake of appearing principled on social media. The UNC government recognizes that diplomacy is about protecting citizens' economic well-being, not winning applause from international leftists. 6. The hypocrisy of PNM foreign policy. Where was Penelope Beckles' concern for sovereignty and non-interference when the PNM government maintained relationships with authoritarian regimes? Where was this principled stand when the Rowley administration's foreign policy consisted of photo opportunities and empty rhetoric? The sudden discovery of international law principles by a party that presided over a decade of diplomatic irrelevance is both convenient and unconvincing. 7. Small state realpolitik requires strategic silence. Small nations survive by knowing when to speak and when strategic silence serves national interest better. The Prime Minister's brief statement accomplishes everything necessary. It clarifies non-participation, affirms peaceful relations with Venezuela, and avoids unnecessarily antagonizing our largest trading partner. Beckles' lengthy moral lecture accomplishes nothing except potential economic blowback. This is the difference between statesmanship and opposition theatrics. 8. Energy sector vulnerability. Trinidad and Tobago's energy sector, the backbone of our economy, operates in global markets dominated by American companies, American financing, and American demand. Our LNG exports, petrochemical industry, and downstream manufacturing depend on maintaining positive economic relationships with U.S. markets and companies. Beckles' statement risks perception that Trinidad and Tobago is ideologically aligned against American interests, potentially affecting investment decisions worth billions of dollars. The UNC government prioritizes jobs over Twitter applause. 9. The Venezuelan economic reality. While Beckles waxes eloquent about peaceful relations with Venezuela, she conveniently ignores that Venezuela's economic collapse has created humanitarian crisis, refugee flows, and security challenges that directly affect Trinidad and Tobago. We have absorbed thousands of Venezuelan migrants, dealt with criminal spillover, and managed maritime boundary tension. The notion that T&T should risk its primary economic relationship to defend a regime that has been the source of significant domestic challenges is strategic madness. 10. Postcolonial posturing versus postcolonial pragmatism. Beckles' statement reads like postcolonial virtue signaling, invoking sovereignty, non-interference, and Caribbean zone of peace, as if these phrases protect citizens from economic hardship. The UNC government, by contrast, practices post-colonial pragmatism. We exist in a world of unequal power relationships, and our responsibility is navigating that reality to maximize citizen welfare, not to perform for an imaginary audience of anti-imperial activists. Principles don't pay mortgages, trade relationships do. Why Prime Minister Pierce Bissessa got it right. The Prime Minister's statement demonstrates what competent governance looks like. Strategic brevity, no unnecessary elaboration that could be weaponized or misinterpreted by any party. Factual clarity, clear confirmation that T&T is not participating in military operations, the only fact that matters for international law and domestic politics. Diplomatic balance, affirming peaceful relations with Venezuela while not condemning American actions, protecting relationships on all sides. Economic protection, avoiding rhetoric that could jeopardize trade relationships worth billions and affect thousands of jobs. Practical focus, addressing embassy staff safety through appropriate diplomatic channels rather than Facebook performance. This is what leadership looks like, making difficult decisions based on national interest rather than what plays well in opposition echo chambers. In conclusion, the PNM's perpetual unseriousness. Penelope Beckles' statement on Venezuela is a microcosm of why the PNM lost power and why they remain unfit to regain it. It prioritizes performative moral posturing over economic pragmatism, rhetorical flourish over strategic thinking, and political point scoring over national interest. The statement reveals a party still operating under the delusion that diplomatic principles exist independently of economic reality, that small nations can lecture superpowers without consequence, and that opposition leaders can cosplay as international statesmen without understanding the first principle of foreign policy: protect your people's economic well-being. Prime Minister Persaud Bissesa's approach, concise, strategic, economically aware, demonstrates the competence that Beckles' verbose moral theater highlights by contrast. One statement protects jobs, trade relationships, and diplomatic flexibility. The other collects social media engagement while risking economic blowback. Trinidad and Tobago cannot afford leaders who confuse diplomatic posturing with statecraft. We need pragmatists who understand that in a world of unequal power, survival requires strategic intelligence, not performative principles that play well on Facebook, but accomplish nothing except potential harm. The Venezuelan crisis will resolve itself with or without Penelope Beckles' lecture on international law. But Trinidad and Tobago's economic relationship with the United States, which feeds families, funds schools, and sustains livelihoods, requires protection from opposition leaders who confuse foreign policy with political theater. The Prime Minister understands this. The opposition leader does not. And that difference explains everything about why one leads the government and the other crafts lengthy Facebook statements that accomplish nothing except revealing her fundamental unseriousness about governance. The record is clear. The choice is obvious. The judgment is rendered.